I can totally edit out any stupidity that pops up.
Fantastic. Okay, good. Then we're golden.
All right. Okay. So I've got you know how it works. It's got a kind of a preset plan of how things, and it's just open-ended questions and kind of flows from there.
Sounds
Uh,
good.
so the first thing I've started everyone with is just their background in writing and in life, how they got to be where they are, how they became a writer, or what influenced them to kind of take the route that we're all on.
Sure. Originally from Lincoln, Nebraska, and worked there, went to school, all that good stuff. I am a reader, always have been, but I do not have an MFA. I'm self-taught. I did get my bachelor's in English and philosophy as a double major, and then I went ahead and got my MA in English in comparative literature. And that's where I stopped it. I had no desire to go on to get my PhD. I wanted nothing to do with academia.
Mm.
And so I stupidly entered the job world during a recession. Had no clue a recession was going on. That's how much into my own head I always was. And ended up working for Experian on the marketing side. You know, you think of Experian as one of the credit reporting companies. There are three of them, Experian being one. I worked on the marketing side and worked my way up to a sales exec, and that's where I spent my 30-plus year career, on the road all the time, constantly traveling, and finally had my fill of that. And then 2 years ago, just over 2 years ago, I officially retired. I'm like, I'm done. And we moved down here to the Ozarks 5 years ago. Sorry, you're going to hear my dog. Her nails on the hardwood floor all the time. She knows dad's coming home soon, so she starts to get anxious. And so we moved down here 5 years ago. We wanted out of Lincoln, and we wanted, because we're both country kids, and we wanted to go back to our roots and get back into the country. Mm-hmm. And so we bought 42 acres down here, and we live in the middle of nowhere. And the nearest town is just 2,000 people, and I love it. Going to Springfield, Missouri is going to the big city.
Yeah.
And I love that, that we are in the middle of nowhere. And I work from home now. I do some editing work. I help a local business do some of their accounting work. It turned out that I was actually really good with numbers, so I do her books for her. She runs a very, very busy medical practice, and I help do her books for her. But yeah, otherwise I am here living life, and we've got chickens, and we've got every type of wildlife you can possibly imagine roaming through the yard at any given time. Wouldn't trade it for the world. So in a nutshell, that's how I ended up here.
Okay. Well, and let's go there first, because that was one of my next questions, because you write about that area and you write about it so well, I assumed you were from the area. So
not at all.
That opens up a line of questioning here. Like, what do people get right and what do people get wrong about where you live?
I will say, after watching the Netflix series, it is... because, I mean, that is based over what we call the Redneck Riviera, which is Lake of the Ozarks, okay? I am on the other side of the Redneck Riviera. I am on the quieter side south of Truman Lake. Mm-hmm. We tend to be mostly retirees. We're much quieter. We're much slower over here. Where over on Lake of the Ozarks side, it is 100% true that I personally am convinced the Kansas City mob is heavily involved in what goes on over there. I mean, I've seen evidence that there's just too much suspicious things that go on over there. They have to be involved. There's some big money over there. When you think that rich on my side is having $1 million home, rich on that side is having an $8 million home. There's a
Mhm.
big difference,
Yeah.
but it's always the haves and the have-nots. I live in one of the poorest counties in the United States. A lot of people here live below the poverty line. Um, but what I love about the people that I live with around here is how self reliant everybody is.
Hmm.
Um, we know how to live off of the land, and that's something that my husband and I both grew up with. That my dad was a farmer, his dad was a construction company owner. So he knows how to build, he knows electricity, he knows plumbing, carpentry. I mean, you name it. And then I grew up with my dad being a tomboy that by the time I was 16 and got my first car, my dad had already taught me the basics on how to fix my own car and how to change my own oil, and I knew how to change a tire. We're very, very self sufficient. So that definitely people get right. What I get irritated about is that um, there's that thought out there, and I'm going to just say, for lack of a better term, calling them out, the East and the West Coasters who think that we're all idiots, and nothing could be further from the truth.
Yeah.
Some of the smartest people around here I know have an eighth grade education. They will
Yep.
blow you away how smart they are.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
I never take that for granted. And I never judge anybody I meet here. Um, I wrote a little bit about what I love about this place, along with what I hate about this place. When I wrote that piece for Poverty House last month,
Hmm. Yeah.
um, because I am surrounded by Confederate flags. I am surrounded by Trump flags.
Hmm.
If I hated them because what I saw they had flying in their front yard or on their pickup truck, I would miss a wealth of understanding who people are, and I would not trade that for the world. I don't care who you vote for, because quite frankly, I hate the federal government, period. I'd like to get rid of all of that, and I make no bones about it. Um, but I will always talk to you because I want to know why you think what you think and why you believe
Hmm.
what you believe. Just like, because I'm not going to judge you by sight. I'm not going to do
Hmm.
it. I'm too curious of a person. I want to get to know you. So that gets very, very frustrating that we're all Confederate flag waving, Trump supporting people, because we're not. And even the ones who are, you would be surprised how incredibly intelligent they are, and they know exactly why they believe what they believe in. And isn't that America right there? It
Yeah.
is to me.
It is, and I think there's a what you bring up that you're highlighting is something that we're missing in the broader sense, east to west coast, is that everybody there's no discourse anymore.
Yeah.
Everybody just wants to stereotype somebody
Yeah.
and go with that stereotype instead of taking the time to understand, why Joe may feel the way that he does about Bob, or why Dan feels the way that he feels about Steve, because something is underlying that's making those people make those decisions. And it's not that people wake
Yep.
up and they're ignorant, or they're uneducated, because there is a difference in ignorant and uneducated. I think
Yes.
people get that mixed up a lot too. But
Yes.
what you said about um, the people in this area, about being smart, common sense wise, they are the smartest people you'll ever meet in your life. The things that they can do with absolutely nothing to get
Yes.
something up and running, or to get something repaired, and the I don't care how terrible a person you think somebody is, they will bend over backwards to help you. you know, and
And
I think
no
that's a
questions
thing.
asked.
Yeah, it won't
They
ask
don't,
anything
and
in return or anything.
exactly. And forgive me for when that trucker mouth in me comes out, but somebody, if you're on the side of the road and you need help, the person who stops to help you does not give a shit who you voted for.
No, they don't. No, and I think there's something in Trent and I kind of touched on this last week in his episode. There's something inherently good, I think, about people that it's really kind of highlighted here. I don't know what that is. I know there are places in America where if I did run out of gas on the side of the road, I'm probably not going to get any help. But
Trust
I
me, I've
feel
been there.
yeah, and
Yeah,
I feel like my odds are better than average. Somebody is
yeah,
gonna one, I'm either gonna know them, or two, it'll just be a good Samaritan that
yeah,
pulls over because it's the quote unquote right thing to do. Uh,
absolutely.
but we can talk about that piece because I read two of yours today, but with two that really kind of hit home. And the first one is the God, Guns, Country, and Jim Baker, right? Because I remember as a boy growing up and the whole Jim Baker, Jessica Hahn thing. It was all over the news, and Tammy
Oh yeah.
Faye was like I don't know. I'll offend people when I say this, but she was like just another Dolly Parton esque kind of person that was just
Over the top.
over
Yep.
the top. So, and
Saturday Night Live skits. Johnny
yes,
Carson made
yep,
fun of it. Absolutely.
yeah, she was the butt of a lot of jokes. And I think if you're listening to this and you're younger than this generation, you could do worse than to give that a Google just to kind of wrap your head around what we're going to talk about.
Yep.
But it was, and Jim was the same thing. It's kind of that same Jimmy Swaggart thing, all tied back together. It's the same scandal basically, except that the thing with Jim was he was going to build a Christian Disney World almost in the
And he pretty much
and he pretty
succeeded.
much did,
Yeah.
you know. And I mean, they were just everywhere in the mid '80s. Like Jim and Tammy were everywhere, and they were the it couple on TV. So the way that you weaved him into that story, and you talked about Confederate flags, and you talked about Christianity, and you talked about country, reminds me of how I used to teach my civics class. And when you're dealing with ninth graders, you've got to put it on a level where they're going to get it, and you have to simplify it. But my oversimplification of winning an election has now become the norm because I told my kids in school, if you want to win an election in America, you just have to be on the right side of God, guns, and babies.
Yeah.
And that's almost the title of what you wrote because
Yep.
that is really kind of what matters around here. And the thing that can be frustrating is you try to get to the bottom of why it matters to people the way that it does. And I think it's a lot of it has to do with religion, how it's presented in church, how these people, because you say in the piece that they assume you go to church somewhere. And just because you do, it doesn't mean that you're hearing the same thing from the pulpit as everybody else is. I mean, I'm Episcopalian, so mine is more on the left side of things than it would be in my
Yeah.
in-laws who go to the Assembly of God, you know. So
Well,
it's an interesting dichotomy we've got going on.
very much so. And I'm sure that you would probably agree with me on this, that as an Episcopalian, um, in this area, be it, the Ozarks, Missouri, Arkansas, or somewhere else in the Bible Belt, um, just like I was Catholic,
Mm.
we were the outliers,
Yep.
because you better be Southern Baptist, Pentecostal, or they do judge you for that.
Mm. You know, my grandma still doesn't really know what I believe.
Yep.
I mean, we've had this conversation. Well, I grew up in a Southern Baptist church, and then when I went to college, I changed. I don't think she can wrap her head around, um, mainline Protestantism. Like, I just don't think that she understands the liturgy or anything. And I'm not saying she doesn't understand it on an academic level. I just don't think she can wrap her head around
Yeah.
why currently am I not eating sweets for Lent, because that's
Yeah.
what I gave up this year. Why am
Yeah.
I doing this? Why am I doing that? And it's odd for her that our sermon is not this hour and 15-minute just blast of hellfire and brimstone,
Yeah.
and that is what I grew up with. And I think that, you know, shows up maybe in what I write, and it definitely shows up in the way that I live my life. It foments a lot of guilt in you too, because everything's wrong, 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 instead of being positive, positive. So I think
Yeah.
you learn right and wrong, but wrong is really driven home in Southern churches in a way that it's not so much in your background and my background.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I think that's a brilliant piece. The Dollar General, like and you
Yeah.
talked about Blue Eye. I know where Blue Eye is. you know,
And I do not lie when I say that little bitty town straddles
it
the north
does.
is in Missouri, the
Yeah,
south is in Arkansas.
yeah,
It's an itsy bitsy little thing, but yeah, right next to the drive into Morningside Church, good old Jim Baker land. I kid you not, 100 yards up is that Dollar General.
yeah, yeah. And if you get there, you're gone. I mean,
Yep,
you're out
gone
of
too
town.
far. Yep,
And that's my hometown. I've talked about on here before, 662 people. We only got a Dollar General about 5 years ago, and it is on the outskirts of town. And our main drag is probably 2 blocks. So once you get to the Dollar General, you're out of town and you're gone.
yep.
So I totally understood that when
Yep.
you wrote
And
that.
another marker right there of rural America is that Dollar General.
Yeah,
And I would
100%.
also throw out a Sonic.
Yeah,
You're going to
yeah,
have those two things. You're going to have
yeah.
Dollar General and you're going to have a Sonic.
Sonic.
Yeah, I love it.
well, yeah,
I am a sucker for a cherry limeade.
yeah, yeah. I get the Diet Coke Easy Ice every day. That's the go-to because they will give you the Easy Ice, or otherwise it'll
Yes,
be
they
packed.
will.
It's more ice than Coke
Yep.
if you don't do that. The other thing that I think I read, I read highlights from the first hour of Tradio,
Oh,
right? Which Tradio is, if you're not familiar, maybe one of the most amazing hours on radio. The stuff that you hear on there and the way that you wrote it, where you had the little asides at the end of each little section, it was almost like you could hear the DJ say those things because they are very much, if they didn't editorialize during those things, it would be the most boring thing you'd ever listen to. It's
yeah.
always like John's got some chickens, and if anybody wants some chickens. But do y'all have is that
Oh
personal
yeah.
experience? There's a
A
Tradio
local
there.
guy right here. We've actually got the radio station right in my small little town, and he does Tradio every morning from 8 a.m. to 9 a.m. Monday through Friday.
Yeah.
And then after that is when it kicks into, and if it's say it's Conway Twitty's birthday, it's going to be Conway Twitty all day long.
That's right. Yeah.
If it's Winona Judd's birthday, it's going to be Winona all day long,
Yeah.
So that's what's so much fun about that. But where that idea for that little piece came from, and I did make up all of that, but it is also very rooted in the type of callers who call in. I was listening one morning, and my heart absolutely broke because this guy called in from his neighbor's house because he did not have a phone of his own, and he was trying to sell a salt and pepper shaker set, and he was asking $1 for it, and it broke my heart.
Wow. $1. I thought you were going to tell me that it was the baby clothes portion that was true.
Uh-uh.
Uh,
Nope, I
that was
made
just,
up everything, but it's
yeah,
that's the one that really broke my heart, that he did not have his own phone and he had to go to his neighbor's.
yeah.
And you can just imagine it was probably those little white plastic salt and pepper shakers that you can buy at Walmart.
With the flip top lid,
Yeah,
or yeah, or
and
yep,
he was
yep.
asking $1 for him, and I lost it.
Well, I'm sitting here now trying to think, what are you going to do with $1? Like,
Yeah,
what was the dollar for? Because
yeah.
that's tough.
Because he obviously needed that dollar, and it
Yeah,
just, I lost it when I heard
yeah.
him talking about that.
That's that's unbelievable.
Yeah.
We've got one locally, not in this town, but in the town where I work. There's Tradio in the morning. And I think it's from 7 to 8, and you hear all kinds on there. all kinds of everything. And if you do listen, there will be a tear jerker every now and then. Um, but yeah, for the most part, it's just good people trying to get a deal. I've, I've
Absolutely.
heard everything from horses to shoes to
Oh yeah.
you name it. It does. I mean, old carburetors.
Oh
I
yeah.
mean, it's
And
just
what always makes me laugh is, it's like our guy always stresses it every show. Um, long guns only. You cannot
yeah,
advertise firearms,
yeah,
you cannot long guns only. And
yeah.
that always makes me laugh because he must say that 4 times every show.
Long
Because there'll be
guns.
somebody going, I got a Sig Sauer, and he's like,
Yeah,
ho, 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 ho. Yeah,
long guns only.
yeah.
All right, let's do. So you mainly write short fiction. It
Um,
says in your
yeah,
bio.
flash
So,
fiction.
so
If yeah, we
flash.
want to
Yeah.
flash. I would say 75% flash, 25% micro. That's where I really found kind of like my heart.
Hmm.
And because I was a failed longer short story writer for many, many years, because quite frankly, I sucked at it and tried my hand at Flash. And I'm like, well, this is kind of fun. I can do something with this
Hmm.
because there are really no rules. And that's what I
Right.
loved about it. I can do whatever the heck I want to do with it. So,
What makes it good? Like what makes short? Because you've been nominated and won some awards for your short fiction. What makes good short fiction? Because I'm a more longer form person. I
yeah,
struggle with the micro stuff. I had a
yeah,
guy email me with some advice last week, and I just told him, I said, "Hey, man," I said, "it's tough." I said, "I'll read this, edit it, send it back to you." But I said, I'm probably not a great person to ask about micro fiction or short fiction because everything I write is usually 2,000 words or longer for a short story. And then, novels are what they are. But
yeah.
what's the key to getting it all into what? First of all, what's your definition of micro versus flash? Are they the same? Some people put like a strict limit on the
Yeah,
words, and it's extremely difficult to tell a story with that few words unless you're Hemingway and do the baby clothes like you did in your story,
yeah,
So
exactly.
that's tough to do.
I kind of stick with not the standard per se, but what most people kind of see micro as being is in that 400 and under, and a lot are even 300 and under word count. And then flash, I cut it at right at 1,000, and my flash actually tends to be somewhere around 750 to just shy of 1,000. Micro for me is much more in alignment with poetic prose. It tends to be a lot more of the microcosm of a moment, kind of like expanding into the macrocosm of just the world in general. So, when I write micro, I tend to be much more dreamlike, much more ethereal. I literally kind of like click my brain over to when I have an idea kind of floating into my head that, okay, this, I can already tell this is going to be a micro. It's poetic prose is really the best way that I can use to describe a micro. Um, with Flash, on the other hand, one, any way you want to pull it off goes. Whether you want to make it a hermit crab by, putting it into something else like a letter or a recipe or however you want to play that off with a hermit crab. One of my favorite ways to do Flash is I've actually got two favorite ways: breathless paragraph, that I am actively working on that cadence and that
Mhm.
repetition that I pull into when I'm writing a flash piece. The other important part of that for me is what is not on the page is just as important as what I chose to put on the page.
Mhm.
So, um, and I'm always dropping breadcrumbs to kind of propel you along as the reader. Yet I don't ever like to give too much away because so much onus with micro and with flash go on to the reader, that it really is like a 50-50 relationship. And that's what I love about that as well. So my flashes, like the first draft, they will usually be 2,000 words just because I like vomit it on the page.
Hmm.
And then I start to see what symbolism is coming to the forefront and what theme is coming to the forefront that I want to pursue with that. And then I just start revising and whittling and word changes. You'll also notice too that I don't tend to use a lot of 50-cent words in my writing.
Hmm.
Um, it's not me. It feels false to me to do that. I like the simpler the word, to me, the stronger the word. And that's
Yeah.
again my kind of my thought on it. But you'll see that I rarely will use a 50-cent word in my work. Just
Yeah.
not a fan of it.
No, I'm not either. I think the simpler way you can tell a story, more people are going to buy in and understand
Yeah.
exactly what you're saying, instead of sending somebody running for a dictionary or a thesaurus trying to figure out, what you mean with that word. But you brought up something that I find interesting, because you sound like me, like an exorcism writer, where you just get it all out on the page,
Yep.
get it out of your body, and then go back and look at it. And you highlighted something that was magic for me the first time that it happened. Um, the first novel I wrote, I did not set out to put a lot of symbolism or any kind of allegory or anything like that in there. I was just writing a story, and these characters did what they did. And then at the end of the story, I did the Stephen King thing and put it in a drawer for a month, didn't read it, pulled it out and went back and read it. And all of a sudden, you've got themes and you've got symbols and you've got allegories and you've got all these things that are going on. And you realize that you wrote about something that you didn't even know you were writing about.
Bingo.
Like, I found parts of the Bible in my book, I found parts of Greek tragedy in my book, like all these things that were never never put there to be there.
Yeah.
They just happened. So, does is that how you see yours? Is that what happens for you in the same way?
Oh, very much so. And a lot of times it's already kind of spinning around in my head. Like if I'm walking on our trails or I'm doing work outside or whatever, all of that is already kind of percolating.
Hmm.
And before I ever go and start writing on the page or writing in my notebook out on the porch, if it's a nice day, it so I've already got a good portion of what I want to put out there all before I ever even start typing it up or writing it up.
Hmm.
And then, like I said, I just vomit it out and get all of that out there. And then I'm a big person too, like you said, you'll put something away. I will tinker with it for the next few days. So I might come up with 2 or 3 drafts in the next couple of days. And then I won't look at it for a week, 2 weeks, 2 months, 6 months, who knows? Whenever
Hmm.
I'm ready to come back to it. I'm not one of those who can sit and write every day and say, okay, from 8 a.m. to noon, I'm writing. I'm not that person. I've just got too many other things that I have to get done in a day's time that I can't just sit there. And if I'm not actively working on actually writing or revising, I feel like I'm wasting my time and I need to throw myself into doing something else, usually something physical.
Hmm.
So I'll go out and I'll do work outside. Um, I respect the hell out of people who can just plug their way through. I'm not one of them. I only write when I'm ready to write and I have something to say.
Yeah, that's me. That is so me. When I've said this on this podcast before, but everything to me comes pretty well fully formed
Yeah.
and then I put it on a page, and then we whittle it down. I
Yeah.
think I'm not one of those that just writes a story and then goes back and tries to carve something out of it. Like, I'm going to throw a big lump of clay at a computer and go back and chip it into something. Like, I pretty well know what it's going to be,
Yeah.
and then it's just getting there, and then you find those little nuggets along the way in the story that you put in there that you didn't even know that you did. So,
Exactly. So there's still
uh,
surprises for sure, and those are
yeah.
fun.
Do
Yeah.
you? So I think I know the answer to this, but I'm going to ask you: do you outline or do you just go for it?
No, never outlined in my life.
Yeah, I haven't either.
Yeah.
I've got a small little, just little snapshot of, so and so is married to so and so, or
Yeah.
there's this about this person. But as far as Roman numerals and letters and knowing where things go and putting stuff on a wall with post-its and stuff, I don't know that I could do that. I think it'd drive me crazy because,
Yeah.
like you, I don't know when it's going to strike me. I don't know if I'm going to ride at 5 o'clock in the morning, 5 o'clock at night, at noon. Um, but when it comes, and you got to sit down and you got to write it then, or you might lose it because
Yeah.
you'll lose ideas if you don't write them down, especially with short stories. Now,
Yeah.
if I'm working on something longer, I can pretty well say, okay, I wrote 1,000 words yesterday, so today at lunch I want to make sure I get 1,000 words, or after work I want to try to write another 1,000 words or whatever. And you can kind of plan that way, but for a short story, I'm going to write that thing all at once, put it away and edit it later, and then try to come out with a whole after
Yeah.
that. So,
And I'm not, I don't write 8,000 word short stories and I don't write
mhm.
novels. I am working and I started working on it late last fall and it's slow going, but that's me. That I'm working on a linked collection of flash fiction about characters here in the Ozarks. And that I actually do have a big piece of paper up on the wall just so I can keep track of characters as I write them. And who knows if they'll make the final collection? I don't know. But this way I can keep track of, okay, who's married to who?
Yeah.
Who had three ex wives and what were their names again? And that's as close as I've ever come to mapping anything out. And that's just to kind of keep me straight more than anything.
hmm The main thing I have to write down is if I introduce a character and they give some kind of detail about themselves, like where they're from or what their father did for a living, I make sure that I like jot that down so that
Yeah,
I know if it comes up in conversation later that that's a piece of that person that's probably going to come out later in the story.
exactly.
So you've got to know that, okay, that background makes that person interact that way. So I mean, there's little things like that, but yeah, I just don't. And some people are just meticulous about it, and like will one of those there's all kinds of little academic wars that go on all the time. The Oxford comma, is one of the famous ones, but people will die on a hill over an outline. And I'm
Yes,
just
they
like,
will.
I was just like, I don't think it's that important. Like, if you can take notes and put a story on paper and you edit it and it turns out fine, I think you've done the
Yeah,
deed,
yeah. Well,
Uh,
and I think that you have to trust yourself enough to know what works for you. I'm kind of glad I don't have that formal writing education because it allowed me to discover what worked best for me
mhm,
instead of being told what would work best for me.
yeah,
And so that's what I wish for people, when people on Twitter or whatever, like, well, should I do this? Should I do that? I'm like, do what feels right for you.
oh yeah,
Um, Nobody said you have to write every single day or you're going to die. It just
mhm,
doesn't work that way. I may go through a phase to where I don't write a thing for 6 months and I don't care.
yeah, yeah, and there's people that will people really love a simile or they really love a metaphor, and they'll tell you, well, you need more comparison in your writing. You need to use more simile. You need to do that. I don't like them. I don't like similes. Like, I just want to like tell you how it
Yeah,
is. Tell him
yeah,
how it is. Or there's the one. This is one thing I'm big on that I tell students that I teach how to write, and there are other people that feel exactly the opposite to me, but I think the adverb is overused.
yeah,
I think if you're relying on adverbs, that's lazy writing to
yeah,
me. But those are kind of my only two non-negotiables. I don't use big words like you. I think that's um, it's too, like you said, it's too much work on the reader, and you need that reader to go on the journey with you and stay the whole time. So, and I think one thing you brought up about your story earlier is we do need to give the reader more credit. Don't give them everything. Like, let them infer what someone looks like, what
Yeah.
somebody's home looks like. You can paint a picture of a house without telling everybody exactly what that house looks like. You can know that somebody lives in poverty or somebody's wealthy just by the way that you describe, you know, the the setting. So I think that's something that young writers struggle with, especially beginning writers. They want to give you everything, like you said, vomit earlier. They just want to throw it all on the page, and this is what it is, and this is where he lives, and this is what he looks like, and this is what his wife looks like. And by the time you're done reading that, you're tired,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah.
So
And I think for me, because I've always been such a reader, I mean, I am just so curious that I read everything that comes my way. I might not be huge fans of certain things. Like, I'm not a huge science fiction fan, but I still read it.
mhm.
Um, and I study everything. I've always had a very, very critical eye for really studying what I'm reading, what I like about it, what I don't like about it, what works for me, what doesn't work for me, what I've never thought of before. I also, surprisingly, um, I read a lot of, I guess for me, and this is going to sound so strange, but one of my favorite ways of learning how to say something yet mean so much more is I've always been a big fan of Sam Shepard's plays. I
Oh
think
yeah.
the guy was just brilliant.
Hmm.
And I have studied that man's plays since the 80s. And just what I've learned from how he tackles things at a slant, I have used that for years in my own work, in my own way.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's interesting. I go to play. I don't read a lot of plays, but the plays that I go to for a reason. Like, I
Yeah.
want to be able to do something that the play does.
Yeah.
Um, I was writing something not too long ago, and I read "Waiting for Godot" again, just to get that just sense of nothing's happening, but there's a lot happening,
Yeah.
in a scene. And just rereading that kind of shows you, okay, this is how you can do this. This is how you can pull it
Exactly.
off. And
Yep.
Shepard's brilliant. He's brilliant at that.
Yep.
I need to read more of his stuff. And he was so just multifaceted too. Like, he's an actor, and he was he's writing plays
Musician.
and a
Yeah.
musician. Yeah, it's just unbelievable. Um, is it True West? That one, uh, that's brilliant. That's
Yeah.
such a
I mean, he's just brilliant all the way around. And he's even got like, there's a collection, I can't remember the name of it now, of course, but a collection of almost microfiction that he did.
see. I didn't know that.
And I love that one too. I actually
Yeah.
just discovered it last year and read it for the first time because he also did a lot of poetry and he's got a few
Hmm.
poetry books out. But
Yeah.
this is almost microfiction and I love it for its simplicity, but it says so much more than what's on the page. So,
Yeah.
yeah, if I go to anybody regularly, it's Sam Shepard.
Yeah. That's interesting. That's the first time he's come up on here, and a lot. I mean, I know more people are reading him than what's talked about on here, because he had a moment there where he was being read by a lot of people,
Yeah.
and I just think he's not read enough.
Yeah.
Uh,
He kind of, the acting kind of took over, which is a
yeah.
shame,
Yeah.
because they forgot about where he was at in the 60s and the 70s
Mhm.
and the 80s. And what this man was producing on the page was just amazing. And what I love about him too is that he was terrified of flying, so he drove as much as
Oh,
possible. So if
wow.
he had to be at a film set, say, from Virginia to, California, he would drive it. And he would
Yeah.
stay in these crappy motels whenever he got tired of driving at the end of the day. And so he had all these incredible stories of these people he would meet by checking into the Motel 6 off the interstate, outside of Albuquerque. It was fascinating.
Yeah. I it's amazing what you and I told my first year students when I had a creative writing class last year. I don't have one this year, but I was telling them, like, just watch people. Listen to the way that people talk. Listen to the way that people interact with each other, because what you write on a page, I will guarantee you, is not the way that humans speak to one another.
Yeah.
Because half the time we don't speak in complete sentences.
Nope.
Most of our sentences are 2 or 3 words, but they say a whole lot with the two or
Yep.
three words. And if you get that right, and you can create the cadence, and you can create a dialect, and you can create all that on the page, then you're winning the war, because
Yep.
that's difficult to do. Because the people that can't do that well, um, it doesn't, it comes off as inauthentic, and it
Yes, it
comes off
does.
as boring, and it sounds contrived.
Yes, it does.
And nobody wants to. I don't think anybody wants to read that. Some people might. Some people might like that
Not
really
me.
narrative style writing, but
Yeah.
it's not for me. Uh, that leads us into a good one of our topics here. You were talking about Sam Shepard. So is that the one? Is he the one guy you always go to, or is there one book that inspired you to write that you go back to?
Oh, well, as far as playwrights, for sure, Sam
Mhm.
Shepard all the way. I go back to him again and again and again. But as far as flash and microfiction, and I do read a lot of poetry. Like I love getting the best, American poetry anthology every year because it's
Mhm.
just a gold mine for inspiration. But I also do that with the other anthologies too, best small fictions and best microfiction. The Pushcart Prize I have to pick up every year just because I love being introduced to so many different styles and so different many ways of saying something, along with other worlds and other cultures that I will never experience.
Mhm.
I mean, I soak all of that in. Like I said, it's like, I mean, I pay attention to what I'm reading. I don't do a lot of reading for relaxation, even though yes, it's relaxing for me. I am studying everything I'm reading and I'm picking it apart.
Yeah. I I think there's almost a curse too, because everybody starts out as a reader that reads for fun, and then you get to the point where I want to know what he's doing in this story, or I want to know how she's telling this story, or why do I feel like I feel right now when 2 pages before I felt a certain way. And I think the experience becomes different the more you read, because you do, whether you are or not, you become an academic reader. I think
Yeah,
the more that you read. I'm doing that with a Jim Harrison book now. I'm reading True North, and that's been a journey for me, because that book starts out as one thing, and then it just continually morphs as it goes into something else,
yeah,
and it ends up being like a family saga style, just generational book. And by the end of it, you're like, well, shit, I just read that, and that's not what I set out to read, you know. And along the way, you're picking up all these little tips with what he did and how he told the story. And uh, he's kind of, I talked about this with Josh on the last podcast. I, I I go back to Jim a lot because of the poetry and the prose, and
yeah,
how they both creep into each other, and he kind of creates a rhythm to the writing that even when you're reading it, you don't understand that there's something going on there, that there's this hidden pentameter bouncing around, but it's there,
yeah.
and he can do that writing about trout fishing, and nobody expects that.
Mhm.
Yeah, I just he helps me be creative. It used to be, I think, like every Southern kid, I grew up reading Faulkner, and you can learn some tricks from Bill, but what he's doing's on a meta level.
Honestly, yeah, let's face it, he's not really an easy read, is he?
Yeah,
I remember
no.
struggling to get through The Light in August, and I'm like, God,
Yeah.
is this ever going to end?
Oh,
Yeah.
and Light in August is brilliant too, and it just like
But,
takes
when
forever.
you're 18, you're like,
Yeah,
what in the hell have you
yeah,
thrown at us to
hmm
read? Yeah.
yeah. You've got to. Oh, we could go down that wormhole, but we're not. Somebody, well, it was Justin Lee. He wanted to do an interview with me on favorite books. Like, what's your favorite book? Just to
Oh my
interview. He's
God. Oh,
doing
I
like a
got mine. It's been
interview
mine
series,
forever.
and mine. He said, so what's yours? And I said, oh man. I said, well, it's Absalom, Absalom. And
Really?
he's like, you're gonna make me read Faulkner. I said, yeah. I said, I just love that book and what the book says about so much stuff. I mean, there's that generational guilt. There's that whole Southern story of, you know, this just reimagining what the past is and how that's told through different lenses. The story that you get about what the story of that area was, just the whole the symbolism in that book. And I like Quentin Compson as a character. I think he's tragically flawed. Well, we know he's tragically flawed
Yeah.
by the time we read that book, but bringing him back from the dead to tell that story and using him in that way, that book has always spoken to me on some weird level. But it's not my favorite Faulkner book. My favorite Faulkner book's The Reavers, and I think
Yeah.
it's just because it's comedic and it's easy read. As I Lay Dying is solid, but yeah, you almost can't teach the books anymore. The short stories you can teach a lot. I
Yeah.
used to teach a barn burning, and of course you can't go wrong with A Rose for Emily. Like that's
Yeah.
just that still grosses people out. Years later, they'll come back to me and say, "Why'd you make me read that story?" Um, but yeah, Absalom's my Faulkner book. Probably, yeah, followed by the Reavers, and then I like a fable too.
Yeah.
But yeah, so you said you had one. What is yours?
Well, I'm going to take it down a notch. Mine, believe it or not, ever since I first read it back in the 80s, and I actually I have all of the editions some of them I paid really good money for. A
Mm.
Confederacy of Dunces, John Kennedy Toole, my
Oh my
favorite book
God,
ever.
we're having a conversation about this book.
My favorite book ever.
Okay, so I need you here because that is a book that I have tried to read 5 times. Five
I bet I've
times.
read it 50 times.
Okay, so good.
Love it.
I crash out every time and I want to love it. I want to read it and love it because of what it is and the story and the way that he gets the dialect right. And everything in that book is perfect. But for some reason, I can't finish it. And I don't know why.
Do you think it's because it's so over the top?
Maybe it's so like, I don't know, Cajun Don Quixote
Yeah.
almost, you know, it's, and that's not bad. I'm not
No,
saying that
I understand
it's
what
a
you're saying.
bad book. I think it's just I've had such a hard time wrapping myself up and everything because the book's hilarious.
Yeah.
Like when you read it, there's so much funny stuff that goes on. He reminds me so much of Kramer and Seinfeld, you know. Uh, it's
Oh,
um, it's just it's. But I'm probably 3/4 of the way through, and I've got to finish the last quarter. But please speak on that book. Inform me.
uh,
Inform everybody because
I
the
mean,
story
I
behind the
wish.
book is amazing.
Oh
Anyway,
gosh, I know. I
yeah.
mean, what a life, right?
Mhm.
What a short, tragic life. But I mean, just Ignatius is this character that is just so freaking over the top in his hatred of communism, yet he's in love with Mina Minkoff, who is
Yeah.
an avowed communist. And And then his mother just has me howling all the time.
What
And
does
when his
his
mother
mother
is
call
on the
his?
phone with Santa, her
Yeah.
best friend, and you can hear Santa beating the shit out of her grandkids on the other end of the
Yeah.
line. And, I mean, just the whole thing. And then when he tries to have like this Sally Field moment at the factory, you know, I mean, I, there's just, I think I first read that book when I was like 18 years old, back in the good old 80s. And I laughed so hard because it's not that I saw myself in Ignatius's eyes, because God knows I don't.
Hmm.
I had just never come across a writer that incredibly adept at
Yeah.
such sarcastic, caustic humor that, I mean, you'll just die reading it. And I
Hmm.
became absolutely addicted to that book. And then I started buying up every time I was in a used bookstore and I'd see another copy,
Yeah.
I would buy it. And then I started getting serious about collecting some of the more expensive editions of it.
Hmm.
And so I've got a Louisiana State Press original first printing.
I was going to ask you if you had a
I
first
actually keep
edition.
it
Yeah.
in. I actually keep it in my safe deposit box at the bank,
Hmm.
because that baby's worth some money at this point.
Yeah.
And I had picked it up back in the early 90s for maybe, gosh, $100 or something like that. It's worth several thousand at this point,
Hmm.
because I don't want to take a chance of a house fire and losing that book.
Yeah.
But I just became, and to this day, no book has ever grabbed me the way that one does on so many levels, yet still makes me laugh like it's the first time I've ever read it. I just die laughing every time I read it.
That's so interesting. It's so I've found it just incredibly interesting to see the people that I've talked to on here, what their books are, and
Yeah.
how a lot of the things, and not just the books, but just the influences and music and things like that, you will see as these air, a lot of the same names, the same bands, the same books come up over and over in this little circle of people. And I was waiting for this one to pop up because it is such a Southern book. It's such a New Orleans book, that
And I'm the first one to ever bring that one up.
you're the first one to ever
Oh
bring it
my
up.
gosh.
Yeah, yeah, and that's crazy.
Yeah.
Um, you're also this will be the last episode of season one, so I've actually interviewed people from pretty well all over the eastern part of the country, and the last episode of season one is just somebody in my backyard, which is like really strange how that's worked out.
Yeah.
But that I'm gonna sit down with it again, and get through it. But what I want to know is, it is a cursed film, much like Blood Meridian is. They cannot seem to get the movie made.
Well, and
And
frankly, I don't want them to.
yeah, I was going to get
It's
your
they're
opinion
gonna.
on that.
I'm sorry, but they're gonna ruin it.
Hmm.
I remember years and years ago, talks were being thrown around of John Goodman, a
Yeah,
Missouri boy,
yeah,
playing Ignatius. And like you said, it's cursed. It's never been able to be pulled off. I don't want a movie made of this book. I do not want this book ruined. And I'm sorry, but a movie will ruin it.
yeah. Is there an actor you think that could have pulled it off?
If anybody, John Goodman, I think he would have been fantastic.
See, I was thinking Belushi might have been able to have done it if he'd have lived.
Yeah,
Uh, but yeah, Goodman would be good for
yeah,
sure, because he can do that New Orleans accent too. I mean, he's played in a lot of movies that were set in Louisiana. So
yep.
yeah, I could see that. I get
Yeah.
that.
But again,
Uh,
I don't want it made. I
yeah,
don't ever, I mean, let's face it. There aren't just all that many great movies made anymore. And
no,
it would just, they would not be able to get the soul of that book on
mhm,
screen. They would just make it this crazy farce and it would ruin it. And it's so much more than that.
yeah, no, I agree with you. I think there are certain books that you shouldn't touch. And then
Yeah.
I think there are certain movies that just okay. So the last, I will call it. You may not like it. It came out this year, but I thought it was the last good movie I saw. I saw The Holdovers.
I
Have you
have
seen
not
it?
seen it.
Holdovers is I'm unaware if it's based on a book. I do not believe that it is. But the screenplay is so literary. It's such a good. It's a good story. It's a good movie. The acting's good. I think it's a brilliant movie, and it
I need
deserved
to check
all
it
the
out.
awards.
Yeah.
I watched I watched Oppenheimer the other night. Um, I didn't like it, and I've got, like I said, I'm a history guy. I've
Yeah.
got a history master's. Read about Oppenheimer. I didn't like the movie. I felt like it just went forever on
Isn't it
those.
like over 3 hours or something like that?
It's three on the money, and it focuses on like the most boring aspects of
See,
everything.
I would lose my mind. It would be
Yeah,
one of those that I would literally take me probably 5 sittings to get through it because I
yeah.
can't sit still for 3 hours, can't do it.
We watched it all in one go, and it was not great.
Yeah.
The other movie I saw this year that I thought was brilliant was Killers of the Flower Moon. I thought that was just amazingly done. It
Haven't
was
seen that one either. I
true to
am,
the book.
I am always like 10 years behind on movies,
Hmm.
you know? It's like when John and I are in the mood to relax, because we don't watch a lot of TV, but I guarantee it's gonna be old Trailer Park Boys episodes.
Yeah,
It's gonna be King of the Hill episodes, old
yeah.
episodes of those. Or if we're in serious moods, we'll pull up the episodes of A Football Life because we're
Hmm.
both big football fans.
Yeah. We used to do King of the Hill. My gosh, we used to have a soundboard, and we would do prank calls with the King of the Hill soundboard, and we would call like Ace Hardware
Oh
and
my
be like,
gosh.
"Say if I needed a hammer," we would just like wear them out or
Oh my
ask for
gosh.
propane and
Well,
propane accessories. Yeah.
since I'm usually in like either a flannel shirt or a t-shirt, one of my favorite shirts that I have is I've got a Strickland propane t-shirt, and it's like I wore it one day when I went into town to get gas, and this guy in a pickup truck pulls up next to me and he takes a look at my t-shirt and
Yeah.
he just
Yeah.
nods at me and he's like, Peggy, the boy. And I'm like, oh my God, somebody gets me.
Yeah. Yeah. Damn it, Bobby has entered the lexicon. I'm telling you. Damn it, Bobby. Uh, that show.
Oh man.
Uh, but it's a little slight, and that kind of brings us full circle back to where we were. It's not okay. It was goofy, and it is what it is. But I thought it was a sympathetic portrayal of Southern people. I thought, it was funny, and it got all the stupid stuff right, but not in a way that felt like poking fun.
Exact, but very, very accurate in a lot of
Oh
ways.
yeah,
That's
yeah,
why I'm just like those writers were brilliant. Oh my
yes.
gosh. And it's I mean, even to this day, when I'm like, uh, giving my husband crap, I'll be like, "Oh, hillbilly redneck," and he'd be like, "Will you stop doing that?"
Yeah,
So I
it's
call him hillbilly redneck all the time.
oh mercy. Um, that's good. So, are you still? I think you are. I think I read on your page. Are you still doing some editing work for Tramp Set?
Yep. Been with them, oh gosh, like 3 years now, I think.
Yeah.
Maybe a little over. I can't even remember. Joe just reached out to me one day and asked if I'd like to guest edit. So I came on for a month to do that, and we did that issue. And then like I don't know, several months after that, 6 months, 7 months, I don't even know how long. He's like, "Hey, we really want to bring another editor on. Scott and I are just overwhelmed. Are you interested?" And I'm like, "Well, heck yeah." So been on board ever since. So it's me and Joe and Scott, and then Mandira. And it's just the four of us.
Yeah.
And we average 400 to 600 submissions a month. So we
I
get
was
quite a
gonna
few.
ask that. I was gonna
Yeah.
ask that. Yeah.
And on a really high month, we've got as high as 800 submissions in a month's time. Um, I'm really, really proud of what we do. We've got really eclectic, diverse voices that we do. And we shoot for about 10 pieces a month because we do have a budget we have to be careful of, since we do pay kind of like a small honorarium to
Hmm.
people. So it's, I guess what I always try to tell people is just, I love that you keep submitting and that you keep trying. Please don't stop doing that. Um, but just know the numbers that, we hover right around a 4% acceptance rate. So
Hmm.
we're like any other journal out there. It's not easy. I mean, we're all in the same boat. It's not easy, period.
Yeah.
Um, but one of the things that we're proud of is that free submissions always open, no
Hmm.
questions asked. We do not care. We want you to use it. That's why we make it available all the time. We don't cap it at all. That's really important to us, that it's open to anybody, whether they've got money to contribute or whether they don't. We don't want to put that gate up for anybody. And that's something we're really proud of, along with a lot of our writers end up winning awards for the stories that appear in Tramsit. And that really makes me proud. Love
Yeah,
it.
and I'm glad you kind of pulled back the curtain there a little bit for people, because I think it kind of shed some light on the difficulty of, one, reading all of that.
It's a lot of work.
Two, it is, and I think it also lets people know that you're gonna know what you want pretty quick if it hooks you, and if not, it's probably not gonna get a long look. So I mean, that really kind of cements the idea that you need to submit your best work and make sure that it's pretty polished, because if somebody's
Yeah.
reading trying to read 800 stories in a month, um, that's they're not going to stick with something long if it doesn't just punch them in the face.
And that's a good way to put it, because it's like, and I'm not the only one who will say this, but you better grab my attention within minimum the first couple of paragraphs if it's a story, or within the first like several lines if it's a poem. So you better come out swinging,
Hmm.
because you have to grab somebody's attention, because there are only four of us and we all read every single submission that comes in. Like,
Hmm.
that's kind of my early morning routine. I go into the queue. Mandira does the same thing. We both kind of have our routines down, and I will go in and I'll read submissions for like 45 minutes, before my husband gets up, because I get up before he does. And that's my quiet time, and whatever I can get through in 45 minutes. If I get through
Yeah.
10, I get through 10. But every single piece is read. But like I said, you better hit the ground running, because you have to grab somebody's attention.
Yeah.
Nobody's going to wait for the story to pick up on page 10. It's not going to
Hmm.
happen.
Yeah, and you can. You've got to go from almost the first sentence, because
Yeah.
even in a novel, if you start out with a long, and I'm guilty of this, I did it first draft of mine, and then I went back and thought, you moron. Uh, you, you want to give everybody everything. So you'll have like a long, detailed history of the town and the people that live in the town. You don't need that. You can show that to people through, and I said show because that's important. Too many people tell people things. Don't tell the reader what's going on. Show them what's happening. It'll make the story better. It'll make the editor reading it understand more of what's going on. But you've got to do that, and you got to do it quick, and you've got to do
Yeah.
it throughout the whole piece. And that's why I find short stories much harder to do well than longer works,
Yeah.
because it is an art, short story writing. And there are writers that only write short stories, and that to me is amazing that you can just do that and just keep doing it consistency, because I've got more room for error. Like I can do just numerous drafts on a novel and just keep working on it. And it can just be as long as I want it to be, you
Yeah.
know. That short story's got to do something in usually under 3,000 words,
Yeah.
uh, because the attention spans these days doesn't want anything. I mean, even I don't want to read a 7,500 word short story. I think you're getting into this could have been a novella thing if you go
Yeah.
that long. I think the sweet spot for the short story is, right around 3,500. And if you can do that well consistently, I think you can call yourself a good writer.
Absolutely. But I still I want you to show me what's at stake
Mm-hmm.
right from the very beginning. Because I'm one of those that I still, even though I'm not hooked in the beginning of a story as I'm reading through the queue, I want to see what the writer is going to do with this regardless. And I'm one that will read through to the very, very end, whether it's a 6-page short story or whether it's a 15-page short story. I will
Mm-hmm.
still read through to the very end because I'm like, and then I'll write a note to Joe, the editor in chief. I'll be like, well, this one's not a no. They really started to come to life in the second 2/3. I really wish that, they'll step back and take a look at what they're doing with this story, because I kept reading to the very end. And this is where they grabbed me, was in the last 2/3 of the story. And that's a
Mm-hmm.
shame.
Yeah. You said that about something's got to happen. That's like that old Vonnegut saying that everybody has to want something on every page, even if it's just a glass of water.
Yep.
Every
Absolutely.
there's got to be stakes throughout that
Yeah.
story to make it worth reading. All right, so we've got our man. I've kept you an hour already. That flew by. I'm
I
gonna
know.
ask
My
you.
husband just walked in, so hopefully he stays nice and quiet.
Well, you've got the obligatory last question about your.
Okay.
You get you three riders, right? Living or dead. You can invite them for dinner, and then you have to tell us what you would serve them for dinner.
Oh my gosh. Oh, okay. Sam Shepard,
Mm-hmm.
without a doubt. And they got to be a writer.
I'll give you some leeway since it's the last
Okay,
one of
but
the
no,
season.
he's
It can
still a
be anybody.
writer. He's a screenwriter. So I want Sam Shepard. I want Billy Bob Thornton.
Okay.
And oh my gosh, who would be my third? Oh, goodness gracious.
The third's always the one that gets
I
people.
know, right? Okay, even though not a writer per se, philosopher, only because what a fascinating life, I'm going to throw in Friedrich Nietzsche.
Okay.
And then we are going to have, we'll have, just keep it simple. Fillets on the grill. I'll make some homemade French fries that I'll cut myself, and a good old salad. And then I'll make a big old chocolate icebox cake for dessert. Call it good.
There you go. There you go. I would call that good. I would call it good. No, those are good. Those are good choices. It'd be a lively dinner. I mean, you could have just served potted meat and soda crackers for
Yeah.
for Billy Bob. Hey, now, speaking of, there's a movie they got right. Sling Blade is
Yes.
pretty solid.
Oh my gosh.
Pretty solid.
Love that movie.
And you can tell somebody from the area wrote that movie and put a lot of heart and soul into creating that character.
Yeah.
So look at us. We've come full circle and we ended where we started.
Nice.
So, well, thank you, Maria. I appreciate it a bunch.
Oh, Dan, I had a great time. Thank you so much.
Yes. And we will talk soon.
Okay. Sounds
All right.
good.
All
You have
right.
a good
Thank
evening.
you. You too.
Bye-bye.
Bye bye.